welcome to a new edition of Africa Today. And in this edition of our program, we will tackle a variety of topics from the African continent, and we'll review some reports. And we start today from South Africa. South Africa's new unity government inspired cautious optimism on Monday from industry and financial markets. But many citizens and political analysts fear the coalition will struggle to deliver economic growth and social change. Details follow.
The fourth edition of the Aswan Forum for Sustainable Peace and Development is being held in Cairo under the title Africa in a Changing World, Re-envisioning Global Governance for Peace and Development. The discussions over 2 days address a number of important African priorities, including ways to achieve peace and security in a changing world, adopting integrated solutions within the framework of supporting the relationship between peace, security and development, and advancing peace-building efforts. Also on the agenda is preventing the outbreak of conflicts by addressing the root causes, highlighting the role of the state in building institutions capable of resilience in order to achieve sustainable peace in the Sahel and Horn of Africa regions. Addressing the inaugural session, Shukri said Egypt is keen to seriously be involved in mediation efforts to settle strifes and support efforts to achieve peace and stability. He said Egypt is in support of peace efforts through active participation in peacekeeping forces and training African cadres in various fields. He said this would contribute to supporting national state institutions within the framework of Egyptian leadership in the field of rebuilding and development in the post-war phase. He said Egypt also contributes to such efforts within the framework of its chairmanship of the NEPAD Advisory Committee. Shukri said the forum's edition for this year is being held at a critical time for the whole world and for Africa, with multiple geopolitical uncertainties and economic challenges.
That was a report on Aswan Forum for Sustainable Peace and Development, which is hosted by Egypt. The forum discusses a number of important African priorities with regards to achieving peace and security. And back to our reports from South Africa. And South Africa's new unity government inspired cautious optimism from industry and financial markets, but many citizens and political analysts fear the coalition will struggle to deliver economic growth and social change. Details follow.
South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa appointed former main opposition leader John Steenhuisen to head an important ministry on Sunday, bringing the Democratic Alliance and other parties into a coalition cabinet for the first time in 3 decades. The ruling African National Congress was forced to join rival parties to stay in power after losing its majority in a May 29 poll, getting just 40% of the vote, the first time it has received under half of votes in a national election. The compromise track left the DA with 6 ministries, including agriculture, a major part of South Africa's economy, which went to Steenhuisen, public works, environment and basic education. It also got 6 deputy minister posts, including finance, trade and energy. For some, especially business owners, bringing a center-right, overtly capitalist party into the fold was a welcome step forward. For parties representing the interests of workers, the mood was even more guarded. Federation of Unions of South Africa, FedUSA, said in a statement that merit does not appear to have been the overarching motivation for all the cabinet appointments. Some businesses seem to share this fear, with the South African Chamber of Commerce and Industry warning key goals will not be achievable if there is no meritocracy. Others were also critical of the size of the cabinet increased to cater for all coalition parties.
Now we are joined over the phone by Ambassador Gamal Bayoumi, former Assistant Foreign Minister. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon. How are you?
Good. So, Ambassador Gamal, how do you see the significance of Aswan Forum for Sustainable Peace and Development and the timing of it?
I barely hear you, but anyway, for Africa, we have a problem.
Yes.
Although Africa is the poorest continent in the world, if you realize, you will see that the flow of money coming out of Africa to the developed countries is much more than the money Africa is receiving from the developed countries. How? Because we pay our debt, we pay our invoice of imports much more than we receive of investment or we receive of exports from Africa. So such a conference is very important in order to put things in order and to bring more investments in Africa. Here it comes the Egyptian initiative when Egypt was presiding the African Union in 2019, where we are asking developed countries to come to invest in Africa with the Egyptian experience, which is very good experience in Africa, and we participate in the story of success there. I see that there is a good reaction from countries like China, like Japan, but still we need much more reaction from Europe, from the United States, because as one European ambassador told me that what I do in Africa in 1 year, I can do it in Osaka, in Japan, in 1 week. So it doesn't pay back. That's why there is a sort of reluctance to invest in Africa. It's very difficult. Africa is still primitive in its services, in its banking system, in its communication and transport. So we have also our duty as African in order to ameliorate our situation. The bureaucracy is killing the investors. The banking system needs to be much more developed. Transport and our ports are not big enough to receive big ships, and so on. So this is my view on this subject. And please try to make me hear your voice.
So, Foreign Minister Shukri said that the forum's edition for this year is being held at a critical time for the whole world and for Africa, with multiple geopolitical uncertainties and economic challenges. Can you elaborate on this?
Also, there is the problem of security, of course, in the continent. Many countries are divided. We have the tribes problem. If you go to any African country and to ask a citizen from which country are you, he will not say I am Nigerian or from Ghana. He will tell you his tribe. So it is divided. Look to what is happening in our neighbor in Sudan. Sudan was separated from Egypt. Then Sudan itself was divided in 2 countries. Now each Sudan of them is threatened by divided according to the tribes and the parties and the families. This is the disease of Africa, and we have to resist this. We have to salute one country and one flag and one army. But this is not what's happening in Africa.
So, Ambassador Gamal, how is the conflict in Sudan impacting neighboring states?
No.
So it seems there is a technical problem, and as we are tackling the Aswan Forum for Sustainable Peace and Development, which is taking place in Egypt, and as we said, that Foreign Minister Sameh Shoukry said that Egypt is keen to seriously be involved in mediation efforts to settle strives and support efforts to achieve peace and stability in Africa. And he also said that the forum's edition for this year is being held at a critical time for the whole world and for Africa, with multiple geopolitical uncertainties and economic challenges. He also said that the international community is now witnessing unprecedented intensity of wars in Sudan and Gaza in a way that dictates adopting comprehensive visions in Africa to face peace and security challenges. And back to our reports from the African continent, and moving to Kenya, where riot police used tear gas to disperse protesters in Kenya's capital, Nairobi. And back to our phone with Ambassador Gamal Bayoumi. Yes, Ambassador Gamal?
Yes, please.
Yes, sir. I was asking you about the conflict in Sudan and to what extent it is impacting neighboring states.
It is a disastrous situation in Sudan.
Yes.
Sudan was a part of Egypt. I am of the generation who was saluting one flag for Egypt and Sudan. And my colleagues in the university were Sudanese. I still have good relations with them. But unfortunately, Sudan divided itself from Egypt. Now Sudan is divided into Sudan, north and south. Each one of them is threatened by another division. And in cases like that, in any other country, we look to the army, because the army look to one country and to one flag. The problem here in Sudan is much serious, as the army is divided by itself.
Yes.
The army is fighting the army. Two Sudanese armies are fighting themselves. I am so sorry to see that, and we have to help our brothers in Sudan to come back to reason, to have one flag, one country, and not to divide themselves like that.
So, Ambassador Gamal Bayoumi, also, if we talk about your expectation for the outcome of this forum.
It is one good step, and of course, in forums like that, we do not solve all for our problems.
Yes.
But at least we can see, we can exchange ideas, and we can exchange views, and we listen quite carefully to the problems of our brothers in the whole African continent. And Egypt, of course, is helping as much as we can. We have the Egyptian Fund for Development in Africa, but we lack reasonable capital to finance all what we need in Africa. But I think that the future for development and cooperation in Africa is huge. Just we need to concentrate and to collect the enough capital and money in order to finance our aims and our projects.
Yes, and what issues do you expect to feature high on the agenda of the forum's discussions?
We need to invest in Africa on many ideas. For instance, food. We have a good chance to produce wheat and vegetables and food in general, and agricultural products in Africa. We need this for countries like Egypt and the whole Arab world.
Yes.
We have a gap of food in the Arab world which exceeded $50 billion. So this is number one. Number two, we have to start small and medium-sized industries. Just a simple industry like the wood cut. I tried to import wood from Africa, I failed because you have to buy.
Yes.
The African wood from France or Belgium or from Italy or England. So if I go there with suitable capital, very small capital, in order to cut the wood, to bring it here, I can bring it for 1/3 of the price of Europe. Another dimension, which is the industry of canned food. Many of the African vegetables and fruits, they just throw it away because they don't have ways and means to keep it in refrigerating system or stuff. So this is another dimension for the investment. We need to ameliorate the banking system. We have to invest on the banking system and establish a very active banking system there. Many things are there, and the good thing that we know the problems, but we have to collect our energy and to find how to finance all our aims, and then we are there.
So I'd like to thank you, Ambassador Gamal Bayoumi, former Assistant Foreign Minister. Thank you, sir, for being with us. And back to our reports from Africa. And right, police used tear gas to disperse protesters in Kenya's capital, Nairobi, on Tuesday, and demonstrators took place in other towns after young activists called for more protests following a week of clashes in which dozens died. Details follow.
Foreign media journalists in Kenya saw clouds of tear gas on a main road through in central Nairobi before midday, where riot police in helmets had been present since early morning. Outside the capital, Kenyan television stations showed hundreds of protesters marching peacefully, carrying palm fronds in Mombasa on the Indian Ocean coast, and dozens in Kisumu in Lake Victoria. In the southwestern town of Migori, protesters had set tires on fire. Members of the protest movement, which has no official leaders and largely organizes via social media, have rejected appeals from President William Ruto for dialogue, even after he abandoned proposed tax rises that triggered the demonstrations. Activists said they are determined to push for the president's resignation. The authorities are appealing for calm. The protests, which started as an online outpouring of anger over nearly $2.7 billion of tax hikes in a proposed finance bill, have grown into a nationwide movement against corruption and misgovernance.
And by that, dear viewers, we come to the end of today's edition of Africa Today. Thank you for watching.